Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Todd Klindt's SharePoint Netcast number 208, recorded live Monday, July 28, 2014. I am your host and one of the finalists on The Bachelorette, Todd Klindt. And before we get any further, I have to give a shout out to my homies at Rackspace. They've provided me with this fancy microphone that Shane can't figure out, the fancy flag, the PowerPoint template, all that kind of stuff. And I'm wearing my Rackspace boxers right now, which really gets me in the spirit. But you definitely need to go out to sharepoint.rackspace.com and check out all the great things there. We've got white papers and videos and video games and all kinds of crazy stuff. So that's all at sharepoint.rackspace.com. Okay, so now let's go on to the production notes. So first off, for all of you loyal Netcast listeners and even more suffering Netcast viewers watching it, I have to apologize to you. So last week, for the second time in like a month, I let Shane do this thing, and nothing good comes from that. I mean, the guy can barely talk, and when he can talk, he doesn't say anything, of value, and then he was just having all kinds of technical problems. So last week's Netcast was just horrible. I apologize for it. Not that the quality level for this Netcast is very high to begin with, but Shane always finds a way to just take it down another notch, and I don't know what to say. I just, 1,000 apologies. But I will say that Shane's Netcast last week, number 207, while it's not going to win any awards, it probably was ever so slightly better than Dead Air. So I guess thank you to Shane, but really my apologies to the rest of you for having to suffer through it, because that's not fair. I don't know what to tell you. He can barely be entertaining when he's with me, but anyway, so 207 Shane did. I was out. I was traveling. I was on the other side of the world, at least for me. But I got it down, got it rendered and everything. All the RSS feeds are updated. It's on YouTube. I've done everything but put the blog post out. So that will happen tonight, tomorrow sometime, but everything's up to speed. So that was good. But again, in all seriousness, thanks to Shane, there was just no way I could have done this from Australia or New Zealand. The internet was terrible and the timing was terrible. I think I was actually in the middle of delivering one of my sessions last week when Shane did it, so it wouldn't have worked. So being consistent is one of the important things with this, so I'm glad that he stepped up and took care of that. Now on to the topics, and boy, do I have a lot of things to talk about, and so we'll see how far I get into all of it, but there's just a lot of stuff's been going on. So the first thing, and the big thing that happened, is obviously we were off the last 2 weeks. So last week, Shane filled in for me. 2 weeks ago, on the 14th, there was no Netcast. I was in Sydney, Australia. I have been graciously asked to speak at the Share the Point conferences. 2 weeks ago was in Sydney, and last week was in Auckland, and it was a great time. I did the Share the Point conference last year in Sydney, but I didn't do any of the other ones. And I walked away from that feeling like I'd kind of robbed myself a little bit, because they're just such a great group of people. I know a bunch of people down in Australia, and they were really, very, very nice and all that. And Rackspace has an office down there. It was a great time. And so that's what I spent last week doing, hanging out in the office with my coworkers and with my buddies down there in Australia, and doing some other stuff. But I have a bunch of fun things that I brought back that I wanted to tell you guys about. So first off, anytime I go somewhere, I ask some of the natives what I should do, what I should experience, what I should bring home, all that kind of stuff. And all of the Aussies and half of the Kiwis, that's people from New Zealand, for those of us in the know, said that I had to buy some Tim Tams. So here's what Tim Tams look like. Tim Tams are candy, and they are like little biscuits with chocolate on them, and they are delicious. Now, I didn't buy, as the topping, the cover here says, the most irresistible chocolate biscuit, and they're not lying. Now, they told me that in Sydney, but I didn't go shopping or anything, so I bought some on at the airport on the way through, flying to Auckland on Saturday, which is a whole other story I'll tell you guys about. But all they had, like the smallest one they had was like these like 4 of these, and it was like $20 for 4 of these. And I remember grabbing it, and I'm like, man, I don't want to spend $20. Do I really need $20 worth of Tim Tams? Turns out, yes, I absolutely do need $20 worth of Tim Tams. Probably should have gotten 40 Tim Tams. They are very good. So, and another thing that all of my Australian and Kiwi buddies have said was, take a look at this thing. Look at the corner. Look at this right here. Oh, there we go. So they've said you got to do a thing called the Tim Tam Slam. And the Tim Tam Slam is thus. So you take a Tim Tam and you bite a corner off, and then you bite the other corner off up there, and then you use it like a straw to suck up coffee or tea or some other hot drink. And then as soon as you get through the biscuit, and as soon as the hot liquid gets in your mouth, then you shove the whole Tim Tam in your mouth before it disintegrates into a gooey mess of delicious chocolate biscuit in your hand. And so that's been pretty cool. I did that. The other interesting thing is that the Tim Tam Slam, well, it sounds like something that a bunch of drunk SharePoint guys came up with. The bag that I bought these in actually had instructions and pictures for how to do the Tim Tam Slam on the back. So it's a thing. It's a real thing. So I've been a big fan of the Tim Tams. My daughters have been a big fan of the Tim Tams. My wife's been a big fan of the Tim Tams. So that was absolutely great advice. Loving these things. As a matter of fact, I brought these downstairs so that I could show you guys. And both my daughters came downstairs and like, "Hey, Daddy, how's it going? Hey, are you gonna open those? Because if you don't know where to put those cookies, we'll help you out." They're big fun. So the Tim Tam, so great advice to all the friends in the chat in Australia that mentioned that. Joanne Klein mentioned that she liked the accents down there. I got a lot of comments on my accent, and I kept trying to explain to them I don't have an accent. They have the accent, but they don't buy it. And the other interesting thing about accents was I flew from Sydney to Auckland Saturday morning, and I was sitting next to a 16-year-old German girl, come to find out. And the flight attendant comes through, and I talked to her, asked for a water or a coffee or something, and the girl heard me speak, and she's like, "Oh, I like your accent." I'm like, shucks, kind of creepy because I'm 40 and you're 16, but thanks. She's like, "Are you from New Zealand?" I just thought that was hysterical because my accent sounds absolutely nothing like a Kiwi accent, but it was, her first big time away from home, and my voice sounded funny, and she thought I was a Kiwi. So it was, that was a funny thing. But yeah, the accent, I kept trying to explain to them that when they made fun of my accent, it was them. It wasn't me. But so another souvenir that I brought home is I did a talk for the Sydney SharePoint user group on Tuesday night. My buddy Ivan Wilson ropes me into that every time I'm in Sydney. And the building that they do it with had some books they were giving away outside, and Ivan just demanded that I take one of these home. And it's a delightful book called Threads of Destiny by Sarah Wood. Now, apparently, this publisher, Mills and Boon, apparently this publisher has kept a lot of lonely Australian housewives company throughout the years. And so Ivan thought this would be a great book for me to bring home. So I have not read yet Threads of Destiny, but I'm sure that it will be great. I can't wait to hear what happens. If the cover alone is any indication, Ivan's steering me in the right direction. He said that he had this one, he'd read it, it was great, and he had many. Mills and Boon were two of his, it was right up his alley. He loved it. So thanks to Ivan for the literary suggestion there. I normally don't read anything that's not on Kindle, but for this masterpiece, I will make an exception. So thanks to Ivan for that. So another thing, like I said, I spent a week in the SharePoint office there in Sydney, and I was there last year and met a bunch of folks and hung out with them. Great folks, very hospitable. Everybody came by and introduced themselves, and one guy made me coffee, and it was because they've got a very complicated coffee machine there. Not the most complicated coffee machine I've ever seen, though, and we will tell that story later in the Netcast. But just a great group of people, and had a blast. This year I show up. They've got a brand new office, and it looks awesome. It's way better than most Rackspace offices, including this one here. And I mean, the Australian market's really taken off down there, and they did a great job of making me feel good. So one of the things that they did is they gave me this. So those, so those of you that know much about Rackspace, you know that we like our flags at Rackspace. So I've got my TCT flag there, and so they, some of them have watched this. They've seen that. They've seen my flag hanging in the background. So they wanted me to add an Aussie flag to this. So I don't know how permanent it will be, but certainly for tonight and for the foreseeable future, I will add this to my my flag collection here behind me. I think it matches well. I think it matches well. But thanks to those guys, they took really great care of me. Every day, people were asking if I wanted to go out to lunch and all that kind of stuff. It was a good time. It was had a lot of fun at the office there. So the Australian conference was a great success, I think. Had a great time there. And then Saturday, I flew over to Auckland. Now, I made these flight arrangements a couple of months ago, and Delta doesn't fly out of Auckland, really, so there was like some partner stuff going on. But Friday, before I left, I changed my flights home, so, a week later, I changed them home to come back a day. I was starting to get a little homesick, missed the wife and kids, so I called Delta and had them move my flights from Friday the 25th to Thursday, and went on about my day. So that night, Friday night, I'm 12 hours away from flying to Auckland for the SharePoint conference, and I get an email from TripIt. If you guys travel and you don't use TripIt, you really should use TripIt. But TripIt sent me an email and said, "Hey, your flight tomorrow has been canceled on Virgin Australia." So I called Delta up and I'm like, "Hey, that flight that I'm on tomorrow got canceled," and they're like, "You're not on any flight tomorrow." I'm like, "Sure I am. The 10:30 from Sydney to Auckland, Virgin Atlantic, or Virgin Australia." And they're like, "Oh yeah, that flight did get canceled, but you weren't on it. You canceled that this morning at 11 o'clock." So when I called up to move my flights from Friday to Thursday, in the midst of all that confusion, the Delta agent had canceled my flight to New Zealand, hopefully by accident. So that worked out really well. Had that flight not been canceled, I would have shown up at the airport the next morning, happy, carrying all my bags, can't wait to get to New Zealand, only to find out that I had been kicked off my flight. So that was pretty scary. But very easily got on another flight, which was the one where I was sitting next to the very nice young lady from Germany. But that all worked. So that was kind of scary. That would have not worked out well had that flight got canceled. Another interesting thing when flying so I flew over to Auckland with a friend of mine, Ben Nyland, and he is from Canada, born in France, but Canadian, lives in Montreal. And it was funny, so like he went through and he did the kiosk thing and everything was great. I went through, I did the kiosk and like some lights went off, and one of the flight people from Air New Zealand, they're like, "Sir, we need to see your itinerary." I'm like, "How come?" It's like, "We need to see when you're leaving the country." Like, pardon? They're like, "Yeah, before we will let you into New Zealand, we need to be sure you're going to leave New Zealand." I'm like, "But what about him? What?" So yeah, Canada and New Zealand get along pretty well. I had a bunch of instances with that. When Ben and I got to customs in New Zealand, we were in line, going through the long line, and one of the customs agents comes by and he's like, "Hey, let me see your passport. We've got this super fast e-passport deal for people from Australia and New Zealand and the United States." And I'm like, "Oh yeah." So I show him my passport and he's like, "Yeah, go ahead. You can go to the fast lane." And he turns to Ben and he says, "What about you?" And I'm like, "Nah, Ben can't do the cool stuff. He's just a Canadian. He doesn't really count." And the customs guy, serious as a heart attack, he's like, "Don't make fun of Canadians. We like Canadians in New Zealand." I'm like, "Well, you don't have to like that Canadian. You can love the rest of them, but that guy, he's a jerk." But that customs guy followed me around through customs, cracking on me the whole time until I got through customs. So yeah, apparently, if you're an American and you're in New Zealand, you don't make fun of the Canadians. That is a no-no. Apparently, the Kiwis feel sort of a kinship with the Canadians because they both feel like they kind of live in the shadow of another country that's kind of obnoxious and doesn't give them enough respect and all that. So I don't know what Greenland has done to Canada to make Canada feel that way about them. No, it was. So then we got in the cab, an old Kiwi cab driver, and I said, like, man, what is it? That guy, and the cab driver, like, yeah, we like Canadians. We way more than Americans. Like, man, that's, that was funny stuff. So got over to Auckland. It was great. Met with some customers, and so it talked about complicated coffee. So I drink coffee here at home, and I drink pretty pedestrian coffee. There's really nothing fancy about it. I've got one of those fancy Keurig coffee makers, but only because someone else bought it for me. And before that, I had like a Mr. Coffee that I bought at Walmart for like $11 and drank either Folgers or Sanka out of it. I mean, my tastes are just fairly simple. But when you get outside the U.S., they take coffee a little more seriously. It's all this espresso and cappuccino and all that stuff that I'm just really not used to drinking. So I had a tough time ordering coffee in Australia and New Zealand. So we get to this customer site in New Zealand, and they say, would you like some coffee? And I'm like, sure, I love coffee. Now I had learned, and try not to laugh because this isn't funny, I had learned that the type of coffee that I want to drink in Australia and New Zealand is called long black. So yes, I did several times during my 2-week stay have to say, I want a long black, please. That just didn't feel right coming out. Anywho, so I met this customer and with one of my coworkers, Matt, and we both want a long black. So they get these coffee, this huge coffee mug out of their cupboard, and Matt goes over there and he hits long black, and picks his coffee thing. And it comes out and it's like a dribble. It's like 6 ounces. I mean, it looks like a little puddle in the bottom of his cup. It was kind of funny. So he takes his cup, and then I'm like, well, I want some too, but can I have a little more? And she's like, oh yeah. So we got this thing so you can get a jug. They call it a jug of coffee. And I'm like, the language thing's a little different, but jug is like big. And she's like, no, that's what it is. You hit that you want a jug, and it starts to fill, and then there's a button. And this is all touch screen and capacitive, blah, and pictures and moving. She's like, yeah, and you just hit a button, and then it stops. I go, okay. So I get my mug, and we put it under there. We're like, yes, this guy wants a long black, and he wants a jug. Go. And the thing shakes, and the touch screen does the thing, and the coffee starts spewing out. So when the cup gets like half to 3/4 full, I go to hit the stop button, except nothing happens. And so the coffee's still coming, and I'm tapping the screen, and then the screen kind of like froze. There were animations in the back, and then as soon as I tried to stop the coffee, the animations kind of froze, and then like part of the screen like distorted, and the coffee's still coming, and steam's coming out, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. So, I felt like, so my cup's getting full and we had to do something. And so Matt had his cup over there that only had like a dribble of coffee in it. And so I'm doing this Indiana Jones thing where I've got his cup and I've got my cup, and I'm trying to swap them quick before my cup gets so full that I spew scalding water all over my arm. Coffee, and we get Matt's cup in there, and it's starting to fill up, and the lady's like pushing it, and there's no buttons. I mean, there's no actual physical buttons anywhere. So we're hitting that thing, and then all of a sudden, like, his is getting, I don't know, half, 3/4 full, getting close to full. Like the screen all updates at once, like you've seen screens do, and it kind of drizzles out and it stops. But I thought I was going to flood the entire country with coffee that morning, all because I had to have a big jug of long black. But anyway, that was a good time. Had my coffee, had a good time over there. And that was on Monday when I nearly flooded the entire island. On Tuesday and Wednesday was the conference in Auckland. Great conference in Auckland. A bunch of people. Met a bunch of people that I'd already, some friends that I already knew. So Chris Mainland is often in the chat room. Not tonight, I see. But I found him over there, got my picture taken with him. If my editing skills work out great, right here will be a picture of Chris and I at the Vegas night in Auckland. And then the next day, I met Brendan Pilot. He works for another friend of mine, Ian Moorish, over there. And if my editing, again, is good, right here, instead of the goofy hand gestures that I'm doing right now, there'll be a picture of Brendan and I. And then some other brave Netcast sufferers that have been suffering with me for years. So it is great. Met a lot of people, got to catch up with a lot of other people, had a blast. Maybe some folks learned some things while we were there. It was a good time. So thanks to Debbie Ireland and Mark Rhodes and Gavin Barron and Nick Hadley, I believe, are the 4 folks that put that on. They did an outstanding job. It was great conferences. So thanks to them for all of that. Now on to some SharePoint stuff for the last few minutes. Kind of the big thing that I've been missing out on talking about was a change in SharePoint cumulative updates. So, last 3 Mondays ago now, July 7th, hot off of doing an outstanding podcast with you folks on Monday night. Tuesday morning, I get up, still got a little bit of spring in my step, still kind of coming down from this thing, get all logged in, watch some funny cat videos, all that, and start looking through my RSS feeds and all that, and I'm like, look, the July CU's out today. I'll be damned. The July CU is out? There's no CUs in July. If I know 2 things, it's that there's no crying in baseball, and there's no CUs in July. But now there is. So on July 8th of this month, Microsoft released the first monthly cumulative update. And they then in following days, they announced that that's going to be a thing now. Cumulative updates are not going to be just even-numbered months. They are going to be both even-numbered months and odd-numbered months, or the way we say it here in Iowa, every month. So we will have more CUs to choose to install or not install. And the idea behind this, it seems kind of scary. Because CUs get kind of a bad rap. They've done some damage in the past. So now it seems like there's going to be twice as many of them as there were before, trying to kill our farms. But this is a good thing, I think. Number one, you still don't have to install them, so you can just ignore twice as many patches. That's fine. But Microsoft is definitely trying to get the on-prem stuff updated as frequently as the online stuff. And the difference is we get to choose. The online people really don't. So I think this is a good thing. Kind of scary at first, but I think having monthly CUs is going to be good. So Scott in the chat room says shorter break between breaking stuff and fixing stuff. Yeah, and I talked to a couple of people on the product team about this, and I said, this seems scary because it seems like there might be less testing time. And his response was, no, not really. He said, we really did all of our testing. We weren't, we did as much testing as we were going to do. The CUs came out mostly on time. And I'm like, well, I remember a couple of June CUs coming out in July. I didn't get the feeling that those were necessarily done ahead of time. But he assumes that they're going to get tested. They're going to be good. So I guess, the big lesson to take away from this is that nothing has changed. And that when CUs come out, don't install them unless they patch something that you need to have fixed. If you decide that you're going to use one, get it in a test environment as quickly as you can, and test it within an inch of its life, and be very judicious about it. And as always, you can go to my webpage, www.toddklindt.com/SP2013builds or /SP2010builds to get the list of all of the patches and where that's all going. And if you want to get really fast updates, you can follow me on Twitter at SP2013patches and at SP2010patches. And then as every patch comes out and things like that, you'll get tweets from me. And that's really for people who don't want to follow my personal account and find out what I had for breakfast or what I'm trying to scald myself with, those kind of things. You can just find out about the patches. So I think it's a good thing. I think that's overall a good thing. Speaking of patches and patching hilarity, I was hanging out with some more Canadians. I could not get away from the Canadians down there. They were filthy with Canadians. And one of them was John White. So John is a Canadian SharePoint guy. He does a lot of BI stuff. And we were out for dinner one night, and he was talking about how he had installed Service Pack 2 for SQL Server 2012, or 2012 R2, I can't remember, 2012. And he still couldn't get all the BI pieces to work, and it was acting like Service Pack 2 wasn't installed, except he downloaded an ISO with Service Pack 2 installed. And I said, oh, funny story about that, John. The SQL team if you thought patching SharePoint was bad, the SQL team has this hysterical gag that they pull during service packs where like the first month that the service pack is out, they have an ISO that has the service pack in there, except it doesn't actually work. Yeah, they did it with Service Pack 1. They did it with Service Pack 2. Those SQL guys, those tricksters. And he just hadn't had the experience, the fun that we had when Service Pack 1 came out and didn't install and didn't come out. So John posted a blog post on that. And you can find it at whitepages.unlimitedviz.com. And it's a good one. They've since fixed it, so if you download the ISO tomorrow, you'll be fine. But he talks about kind of what the symptoms are and all that kind of stuff. So it was a crazy deal, but it was just one of those things, when you get out and you're at conferences and you're hanging out with all your buddies and chatting about stuff, you learn things, and it was a great time. So here's another one. So I talked in Netcast 206 about some of the SharePoint Online PowerShell commandlets and how sadly disappointing they were because there was only 30 of them. And they continue to be a disappointment to man, woman, and child alike. But for my session on those commandlets for the Sharing the Point conference in Australia, New Zealand, I had a 60-minute time slot. Not the 10-minute time slot it would take me to talk about the SharePoint Online commandlets, but 60 whole minutes. So I had to come up with some stuff to burn time. I had a dance number that I'd been rehearsing, so that took a few minutes. I had some poetry that I was going to read. That took a few minutes, but we still had a lot of time left. So I ended up talking about a couple of other things that were associated with that. One of them was that there are SharePoint Online commandlets that work with SharePoint Online, but there are also the Windows Azure Active Directory commandlets, or WAD, W-A-A-D commandlets, that are for Azure and SharePoint Online, the Office 365 thing. So they let you deal with users a little bit, and then also things like federation and domains and things like that, but there's still not a lot in there. So for both of those talks, what I spent the end of the time talking about was using CSOM with PowerShell. Now, you folks are all delightful, beautiful, smart, and good-looking IT pros, so hopefully you don't know what CSOM is. That's a developer-y thing. Sometimes I have to cross those lines, though, and I take the shots for you guys. I talk to developers, I hang out with developers, so that you don't have to. So the CSOM is the client-side object model, and this was something that really first made its debut in SharePoint 2010, but has really come to life in SharePoint 2013. And this is a thing that Microsoft added that allows, it's another alternative to code that runs on the server. This runs on the client side. And so if it's going to crash something, it's going to crash your browser and not the server, which, unless it's your particular browser, is probably a good thing. So the great thing about CSOM is it's just web requests. So while you can do them in web pages and all that kind of stuff, you can also do them with PowerShell. And so I spend the rest of that session saying, well, here's a bunch of stuff that you can't do with the SharePoint Online commandlets, but here's how you can do them with CSOM. Like, you can't create a web with the SharePoint Online commandlets. You can, the smallest thing you can create is a site or a site collection. With CSOM, you can create a web. You can get a list of webs. You can create a list. You get a list of, just all the kinds of things that your developer buddies have been doing in their apps. If you know how to form it in CSOM, you can do it in CSOM. So that was pretty cool, and I spent a bunch of time talking about that. Chris O'Brien had a pretty good blog post on that. I didn't put it in my notes, but I'll put it in the show notes on just some examples on how to use CSOM. So I kind of walked everybody through that, showed some examples, and then said, but here's the kicker. Here's the thing that is the coolest of all about this. All these things that I've just showed you using CSOM with SharePoint Online also work with SharePoint On-Prem, because it's the same thing. And so this gives you options for, if you have people that want to script things like web creation, power user-ish things, but not power user-ish enough that you actually want to let them anywhere near your SharePoint server, you can do it with CSOM. It would be trivial to write a quick PowerShell script that created a bunch of webs, did whatever. So this works with SharePoint Online and with SharePoint On-Prem. So if I think about it, I might blog some of this stuff because it's kind of cool. There's already a bunch of stuff out there on it, but another blog post won't hurt. But that was kind of the real value add to that PowerShell session was the SharePoint Online commandments are a huge disappointment, but here's how to augment all that. So that was kind of fun stuff for me. Since I've already sullied this with a developer-y topic, and I guess I should have linked John's blog post in the chat room. There you guys are. I'm sure you were all wondering where that was at. Another friend of mine that I hooked up with while I was there was James Milne, and he was doing a session on Project Sienna. Now, I've talked about Project Sienna before on the Netcast a while back. Project Sienna is kind of it's a development environment, but it allows you to create Windows 8 apps inside of an app. So it's kind of like drag and drop stuff, so it's way more friendly than Visual Studio. But you can do things like add data sources and format things. It's a really great way to make super simple Windows 8 apps. It gives you a good integrated environment for that IDE. So he was doing a session on that. Sadly, James and I kept getting scheduled at the same time, so I wasn't able to go see his session, but I'm going to go grab his notes and all that. But if you've got an idea for a simple Windows 8 app, Sienna is probably a great place to start. And you can go out to the App Store and download it. It's a free download. You can just go Google it or go to the link. Doug Hemiger, and this is why I just don't like developers. He says nothing is more friendly than Visual Studio. And that reminds me of another thing. So one of my buddies in Australia is a guy named Brian Farnhill. Used to be like a consultant. Now he works for Microsoft Australia. But he's a PFE in Australia, which is a little different than the PFEs in the States. He actually gets to touch things and do stuff. He's a developer by trade. He has been a SharePoint developer for years, gets this PFE gig, and for the last 6 months or so, he's been doing install type stuff. And him and I were shooting the breeze one afternoon, and he's like, after doing this admin stuff for 6 or 7 months, I get why you guys hate developers. And I'm like, see, that's how that happens. I told you I was right the whole time. So that seems like somebody who has been on both sides of the fence. He agrees admins are cool. So that was a good time. So check out that Project Sienna. It's great to just to piddle around with. All right, we got a few minutes left. I'm going to hit these last couple of topics pretty quick. Windows Phone 8.1. I've been enjoying it on my Lumia 920 using the developer preview. Now I'm seeing stuff that Windows 8.1 is starting to roll out to carriers. So if you have a Windows Phone 8, not 8.1, and you're waiting, got a 1520, got a 920, whatever, that's probably going to be showing up pretty soon. If you have the developer preview, like myself, you might not get it. They discovered some problems if you had the developer preview and some BitLocker on your phone. It caused problems. So I think for people that have the developer preview, we're going to have to uninstall the developer preview, maybe wipe our phones back to OEM or something like that. So I'll keep an eye out for that. I'll have to do it on mine. So once I know that AT&T has pushed that out, I'll do it and find out for you. Another thing that Microsoft released in the last couple of weeks is their live lock screen beta. So this is some customization you can do to the lock screen on your phone. Not a lot of great stuff there, not for me, but it was, they showed it off at some conference somewhere, and everybody got excited. So it's finally out now. But you can check that out. There's a link to it in the App Store there. Another cool thing that I was doing. I was working on some stuff at home this weekend and was online looking for a part to see if the local hardware store had it. Found it, they had it. Drove down to the local hardware store and couldn't find it. And wasn't sure if I was looking at the wrong thing or whatever. Had my handy-dandy Windows Phone with me. And one of the great new features of Windows Phone 8.1 is the ability to sync tabs. So I'd been sitting at my desk, had Internet Explorer up. It was sitting on the tab for the thing that I wanted at the hardware store. I fire my phone up, I fire Internet Explorer up, I hit the tabs button, and it says, here are the tabs on this device. But you can scroll or get it from a drop-down, I forget, and you can see the tabs on your other devices that are running Windows 8.1 and IE 11. So I was able to bring up the tabs on my desktop computer on my phone. The part that I was looking for, that tab was still open. I hit it. It loaded the tab on my phone without me having to type a single thing. And then I was able to show the guy there what I was looking for. So that is new. It's kind of hidden, but your favorites and your tabs both with Windows and Windows Phone sync across all the instances, which is fantastic. I use it all the time. And so if you've got those, play with those a little bit. So it's great. If there's something you know you're going to want to need on your phone, just fire it up once on your desktop where you can type and you got your keyboard and all that. Great functionality. And the very last thing that I'm going to bring up is today, this afternoon, late this evening, whenever it was, the fine folks at Fitbit released an official, and that's the way it's pronounced, Fitbit app for Windows Phone 8.1. So a bunch of us have these little things. I'm trying to get mine out. This little fellow right here who tells me how little I haven't been moving today. Oh, only 8,600 steps. Boo. But there has not been a Windows Phone, an official Windows Phone app till today. Now, a couple of folks had written third-party ones, and they work pretty well. But this one is the official one. If you have a newer phone than mine, one that does the Bluetooth low energy thing, your Fitbit can actually sync to your phone, which would have been great for me because I sync to a box that sits here at home. So when I was gone for 2 weeks, I didn't sync at all. But that app is out there. I've only given it kind of a cursory look over, but it's pretty nice. It's a nice little app. So thanks to the folks at Fitbit out there for supporting us Windows Phone users. All right, so we're over a little bit. We'll jump into the shameless self-promotion, which is kind of short now because all the big conferences have gone. So the next time you get a chance to see me live, we'll be at SP TechCon, and that is September 16th through the 19th. I made my hotel reservations today. It's official. I will be there. So Shane and I are doing a half-day session on Upgrade. And then we're doing a PowerShell session and an admin trips session. Admin tricks session, not admin trips, way less exciting. And that will be out at SP Tech. And I'm sure we'll have a booth and all kinds of stuff. All the fun and frivolity that comes with having Rackspace at your conferences. And so we will be there for that. And then a couple of weeks later, I will be at the SharePoint Exchange Forum in Stockholm. That is September 29th and 30th. And I will be doing my Visual Studio load testing session and an upgrade session. So that will be good. So that's it for now that I've got for stuff going on, promotional stuff. But we'll see. There's always something cooking. I always got something going on. So thanks to everybody. We ran a little long tonight, not too bad. I kind of blew through the last part there for you guys. But again, thanks to everybody in Sydney and Auckland. You guys were great hosts. The conference folks, the rackers, the attendees, everything had a brilliant time. It was a good time. Thanks to you guys in the chat room. You guys have been very active tonight, and I appreciate all that. Very, very good. Shane's in there. It was good for him to show up and see how like a true professional does this. This might help him a little bit. I don't know. If he can be helped, this should help. But thanks to everybody. I will be here next week. No more long breaks here for a bit. The week after that, though, Shane doesn't know it yet. He might get to fill in for me in a couple of weeks because I'm going to be out of town. But thanks, everybody. Have a good week, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.